Everyone at Fort Bellamy Medical Center called her the Quiet One. She never argued, never raised her voice, never looked anyone in the eye for more than a second. Nobody knew that 3 years ago, she had carried a dying man 2 miles through enemy fire. Nobody knew her hands had once steadied a rifle instead of a clipboard. Tonight, a stranger would say 4 words, and everything she'd buried would come back up. Hey, welcome back to Silent Heroes. If you're new here, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from tonight, and hit subscribe, because trust me, you don't want to miss how this one ends. The doors of the ICU wing banged open at 6:47 p.m. Maya Coleman didn't look up from her charts right away. She had learned that the fastest way to survive in a place like this was to make herself small. Small enough that Dr. Aldridge Whitfield wouldn't notice her. Small enough that nobody asked questions about the thin white scar that ran along her collarbone, or why her eyes swept every room like she was checking exit. She was 31 years old, 5'6", brown eyes that gave away nothing, hands that never shook, not once, not in 4 years of night shift. She told people her name was Maya Coleman, RN. That was true. It just wasn't the only name she'd ever had. For 6 years, she had gone by something else, a call sign, a different life entirely, one that ended, officially, the day she signed a stack of papers and walked away from everything she used to be. Dr. Whitfield ran the trauma unit like a kingdom. He was tall, silver-haired, always photographed at hospital galas with his hand resting on someone's shoulder like he owned the room. He liked being right in front of an audience. He liked being wrong quietly later, when nobody remembered. Coleman, he said, breezing past her station without stopping. Try to look useful tonight. We have a full house. She said nothing. She just wrote down the vitals in front of her, steady-handed, silent. An older patient in bed 4, a retired firefighter named Walt, watched her do it. You ever notice, he said one night, how you check every door before you check a chart? I've known combat medics who move like that. She'd smiled and changed the subject. He hadn't pushed. But he hadn't forgotten either. Tonight, Walt's bed was empty. He'd been discharged that morning. She didn't know yet how much she'd miss having him nearby. At 6:47, the doors banged open for real. Multiple GSW, male, late 30s, BP dropping. 2 paramedics wheeled in a gurney soaked dark at the shoulder and thigh. The man on it was fighting them, thrashing, his hand clamped around the rail like it was the only solid thing in the world. Get him sedated, Whitfield barked, striding in with his coat still buttoned, his hair still perfect. I want him under before. Don't touch me. The patient's voice cracked through the room like a whip. Don't, I need, get away. He wasn't just panicking. Maya clocked it in half a second, the glassy stare, the shallow rapid breathing, the way his good hand kept reaching for a hip that had no holster on it anymore. Combat flashback. Not simple pain. Not simple fear. Whitfield didn't see it. Whitfield saw a difficult patient. Restrain him, he snapped. No, Maya said. It was the first time she'd raised her voice in that building in 4 years. Every head turned. She stepped forward, into the light, into the noise, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't make herself small. She leaned close to the thrashing man's ear and said 3 words, low and even. Reaper. Stand down. The room went silent. The word hit like a detonation. The patient's whole body stopped moving. His eyes locked onto hers. Really looked for the first time since the doors banged open, and something in his face cracked open with recognition. Ghost, he rasped. Whitfield's mouth was still open from the order he never finished giving. Somebody explain to me, he said, voice tight, what is going on? Maya didn't answer him. She was already moving, hands finding the wound at the man's shoulder with a precision that made the paramedic step back without being told to. She pressed 2 fingers below his clavicle, feeling for a pulse that shouldn't have been that faint, that fast. Tension pneumothorax, she said, flat and clinical, to no one and everyone. Tracheal deviation, decreased breath sounds on the left, jugular distension. If we don't decompress this chest in the next 90 seconds, his heart stops from pressure alone, not blood loss. It's a real and dangerous condition. Air trapped in the chest cavity collapses the lung and crushes the heart's ability to pump. Left untreated, it kills in minutes, not hours. The fix is brutally simple and brutally fast. A needle, placed correctly, releases that pressure before the heart gives out. Her hands had been steady before. Now they were something else entirely, sure, fast, without a flicker of hesitation, the tremor she always carried in crowded rooms simply gone, vanished, like it had never existed. 14-gauge needle. Second intercostal space, midclavicular line. Now, she said. A nurse froze. Whitfield froze. The patient, the man she'd called Reaper, just watched her with the look of someone seeing a ghost rise from the dead. Coleman, stand down, Whitfield said, finding his voice. You are not authorized. I don't need authorization to keep him alive, she said. I need 30 seconds. She didn't wait for permission. The needle went in clean, angled, precise. A hiss of trapped air escaped the chest cavity, and the monitor's screaming alarm dropped from a shriek to a steady, survivable rhythm. The man's shoulders sagged. His breathing evened out. Color crept back into his face. Got it, Maya said quietly. He has a chance. The room exhaled with her. Whitfield did not. You are suspended, he said, loud enough for the hallway to hear. Effective immediately. Unauthorized procedure, insubordination, and… He searched for one more word to make it sound bigger than it was, assault on hospital protocol. No, Maya said. I am just done hiding. She didn't move from the patient's side. She kept 2 fingers on his pulse, counting silently, while a small crowd gathered at the doorway, nurses, an orderly, a night shift resident who'd never seen Coleman raise her voice once in 2 years of shared shift. Whitfield's face reddened as he realized how many people were watching him lose control of a room he'd claimed to command. Somebody remove her, he said. Nobody moved. By 7:20 that evening, 3 men in dress uniforms walked through the ICU doors like they'd done it 100 times before. The one in front, a broad-shouldered officer with silver at his temples, stopped in front of Maya and saluted, actually saluted her, in the middle of a hospital hallway. Master Sergeant Coleman, he said. Or should I still call you Ghost? Whitfield's mouth opened and nothing came out. This woman, the officer continued, turning to face the gathered staff, served 6 years as a combat medic attached to a special operations unit. 2 Purple Hearts, a Bronze Star with valor for a rescue under fire that saved 4 men, including the one on that gurney. She has more field surgical experience than most trauma chiefs in this state. The hallway went dead silent. Whitfield's silver hair suddenly looked less distinguished and more like a man trying to hide behind it. This is a mistake, he said. I run this floor. Not for much longer, the officer said. Not after we finish the review board pulls on the falsified incident report you filed against Nurse Coleman 8 months ago. The one that got another nurse fired for a mistake that was, we now understand, entirely yours. Whitfield's face went white. That was the twist nobody had seen coming. Not malpractice, not incompetence alone, but a cover-up. A drug trial Whitfield had quietly pushed through the hospital's research wing, funded by a pharmaceutical rep he'd been photographed with at 3 separate galas, cutting corners that had already hurt 1 patient and nearly hurt more. The nurse he'd blamed for it had said nothing, afraid of losing her license. Maya had seen the paperwork once, months ago, and said nothing too, until now. Whitfield didn't wait to be escorted out. He lunged, not toward the door, but toward the crash cart beside the patient's bed, toward the tray of medications, toward 1 vial in particular that could stop a weakened heart in under a minute. Get back, he snarled, vial in hand. Nobody comes near me. Maya moved before anyone else could react. Old instinct, old training, muscle memory that had never really left her. She caught his wrist, twisted, and the vial clattered to the floor unbroken. Reaper, the patient rasped from the bed, struggling to sit up despite the tubing. She still owes me a rematch from Fallujah. Not now, soldier, Maya said, pinning Whitfield's arm behind him for the security guards now flooding through the door. Her voice cracked just once. You almost let a man die to save your reputation. I watched men die for real reasons. I am not doing it again for you. It wasn't a grand line. It didn't need to be. It was just true. 3 weeks later, the hospital held a small ceremony in the same wing where it had all happened. Whitfield's license was suspended pending investigation, the falsified report was formally reversed, and the nurse he'd blamed was quietly reinstated with back pay. Maya stood at the front of a new unit, the Coleman Trauma Response Program, built to train civilian nurses in combat-level emergency response. She didn't hide the scar on her collarbone anymore. Walt, the retired firefighter, came back to visit that week, leaning on a cane, grinning like he'd known all along. Told you, he said. Combat medic. You did, she admitted. Reaper, whose real name was Danny Ruiz, became the program's first graduate volunteer, teaching survival breathing techniques to nervous new patients. Some wounds don't close in a hospital. They close in rooms like that one, full of people who finally understand each other. Here's the truth this story keeps circling back to. The people who seem the quietest are often carrying the heaviest things. Strength doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just waits, patiently, for the moment it's needed most. If this story moved you, hit like, subscribe to Silent Heroes for more stories just like it, and drop a comment. What call sign do you think Maya used before ghost? The next story is already waiting. The end.